The Cybernetic Punch, in the dimly lit corners of South Beach, where neon lights flicker like distant galaxies, I stood with my back against the rough brick wall, observing the entrance to Vanguard Technologies. A gust of salty ocean breeze swept through the narrow alleyway, carrying with it the faintest echo of laughter from the lively crowd spilling out of a nearby bar. The night was young, and so was the fear gnawing at my insides. 5 years ago, I was Jax the Jaguar Kane, undefeated lightweight boxing champion, feared in the ring and revered outside it. My fists were legend, each punch a symphony of power and precision. Then came that godforsaken wave, the one that sent me airborne before smashing me onto the reef like a discarded doll. When they pulled my broken body from the water, I was alive but barely. My dreams of another title fight shattered alongside every bone in my arms. The docs gave me little hope, but they hadn't counted on Dr. Amelia Hart and her radical idea, cybernetic limbs, enhanced advanced state of the art technology that would give me back what the ocean took. Desperate, I agreed, signing away my rights to the prototypes, blindly trusting a stranger with my future. The operation was a success. My new arms weren't just functional, they were formidable, each one packing more punch than ever before. The Jaguar was reborn, not tamed but amplified. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed beyond just flesh and metal. It took time to realize what it was, the hum, always present, like a whisper from another world. Now here I was, loitering in an alley on a Tuesday night, waiting for a signal from that same hum. The entity, as I'd come to think of it, had grown bolder over time, its intentions clearer. It wanted something, and it seemed to believe my cybernetic arms were the key. A soft chime echoed through my skull, signaling the opening of the reinforced steel door at Vanguard Tech's rear entrance. My pulse quickened as I pushed off from the wall, stepping out into the open and towards my destiny. The security guard barely glanced up from his phone as I strode past him, the retinal scan confirming my identity, Jax Kane, authorized tester for Vanguard Technology's latest R&D project. Authorized, but not informed, not about the true purpose of these late night visits or the entity's true intentions. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my enhanced arms propelling me forward with an ease that still sent a thrill down my spine. The hum grew louder, more insistent as I approached the lab on the 4th floor. The door slid open silently, revealing Dr. Hart hunched over her workstation, oblivious to my arrival. "Evening, Doc," I greeted, watching her startle at the sound of my voice. "Jax," she exclaimed, clapping a hand over her heart. "You startled me." I aimed to please. I replied with a smirk, sauntering closer. Her gaze flicked towards my arms, then away again, a familiar dance we'd been performing these past few months. "You're here about the new prototype?" she asked, rounding her desk and leading me towards another door marked restricted access. "I am," I confirmed, though curiosity gnawed at me. She'd always been vague about the projects she had me test, skirting around details with a practiced ease. Yet tonight, there was an urgency in her manner that set my nerves on edge. The restricted room held nothing but a single terminal connected to a humming server rack. Dr. Hart took a seat before it, motioning for me to stand behind her. As I did, the hum grew louder still, vibrating through my bones like the purring of some monstrous cat. "You remember our first conversation, Jax?" she asked suddenly, fingers poised over the keyboard. "Vaguely," I drawled, crossing my arms, an unconscious gesture that sent a jolt of pain down one side. I uncrossed them hastily, hiding the wince behind a smirk. She turned to look at me then, her eyes bright and fervent behind her. "Glasses. I told you about the potential in your cybernetic limbs, didn't I? About how they could revolutionize not just boxing, but every sport out there. They're sure packing one hell of a wallop." I agreed noncommittally. "But that's not all they can do, Jax," she pressed, swiveling back around to face the terminal. "With the right programming, your arms could become something extraordinary." Before I could respond, she typed in her access code and hit enter. The hum reached a fever pitch as screens flickered to life throughout the lab, displaying lines upon lines of code streaming past too fast to follow. "Behold, Jax Kane," Dr. Hart intoned dramatically, "the future of human potential." The room went silent, but for the whirring of machinery and the rush of blood in my ears. Then, like a bomb detonating within me, my cybernetic arms seized up, every muscle locking tight as pain lanced through me. I crumpled to the floor, screaming, as unseen forces tore at my insides. Darkness claimed me briefly before harsh fluorescent lights, and Dr. Hart's worried face swam back into view. "Jax, can you hear me?" Groaning, I pushed myself up onto wobbly arms that felt different somehow, heavy, powerful, but no longer under my control. Panic surged through me, yet I kept it leashed, years of conditioning keeping fear at bay. "What the hell did you do to me?" I demanded, voice low and dangerous. Dr. Hart swallowed hard, visibly steeling herself. "I gave you what you were born for, Jax," she declared fervently. "You're more than just a man now, an athlete, a soldier, a god among mortals." "And who gets to decide when I become less?" I countered, rising to my feet and towering over her. She didn't back down, though, chin lifted defiantly. "I won't let you waste this gift, Jax. Your potential is unlimited with these limbs. You can change the world, but first," her gaze slid towards the terminal, "you need to retrieve something for me." My stomach churned. This was what I'd feared all along, that they hadn't just replaced my arms, but altered them too, imbuing them with something malevolent. And now it seemed Dr. Hart wanted me to use those corrupted limbs to steal whatever it was she sought. "Forget it," I spat. "I won't be your pawn." She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against one of my metal forearms. The hum resonated between us, and I saw understanding bloom in her eyes. She'd heard it too, felt that otherworldly presence lurking within me. "It's not about pawns, Jax," she said softly. "It's about our shared destiny." Before she could elaborate further, an alarm blared to life, piercing the night air like 1,000 sirens wailing in unison. Red lights flashed overhead, casting eerie shadows upon Dr. Hart's face as she turned towards the entrance. "Seems they've caught on," I observed darkly, muscles tense and ready for fight or flight. She smiled grimly at me over her shoulder. "Then we'd best make this quick." The door burst open moments later, revealing 2 security guards brandishing firearms that now seemed laughably ineffective against my enhanced body. Dr. Hart stepped forward, hands raised placatingly, but they weren't looking at her anyway. "Jax Kane," the foremost guard barked, "you're under arrest for unauthorized access and sabotage of company property." "I'd say I'm sorry," I drawled, "but you know how it is with these cybernetic arms, always getting into trouble." They charged simultaneously, guns raised. In unison, my arms surged forward, palms slamming into their chests hard enough to send them flying backwards through the air before crashing onto the floor. Dr. Hart stared at me wide-eyed as I stood there, panting and disbelieving of what had just transpired. Then she blinked, shook her head, and refocused on our task. "They'll have backups," she declared, turning towards the terminal again. "We need to wipe everything clean." I stood there undecided. Until another alarm blared, this one from within me. My arms twitched, fingers curling into fists as that alien presence demanded action once more. With a growl, I gave in, stalking forward and planting myself before the terminal. "Tell me what you need," I bit out. She didn't hesitate, rattling off commands swiftly as I typed them in one-handed, my other arm hovering protectively over her shoulder. When we finished, she nodded satisfaction, stepping back to let me do my part. "You're sure about this?" I asked once more, even as my hands moved automatically across the keyboard. She hesitated then, glancing at my arms before meeting my gaze steadily. "I'm not lying when I tell you that our fates are intertwined, Jax." My cursor hovered over enter, ready to enact whatever digital carnage awaited beyond that final keystroke. But I paused, looking deep into Dr. Hart's eyes and searching for any trace of deceit there. "You'd better be right," I warned at last, striking the key with unhesitant force. A final scream of protesting machinery later, silence descended once more. The screens darkened one by one until only my reflection stared back at me from the blackened monitors. Behind me, Dr. Hart stood silent and watchful. "It's done," she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Done," I confirmed grimly, turning to face her. "And now you owe me answers." She nodded acceptance, leading us out of the restricted room back into her lab. There she paused, hands clenching at her sides as she struggled visibly with what she intended to say next. "My mother used to tell me stories," she began abruptly, eyes distant and lost in memories past. Tales about ancient gods who walked among men disguised, until one day they were betrayed by those same men they'd once protected. I listened closely, unease prickling along my spine at the familiarity of such tales. "They became something else then," she continued softly. torn apart from their divine essence, bound within metallic flesh like yours. She looked up at me now, sincerity blazing bright in her eyes, until they could be reunited again by those who'd once betrayed them. My throat tightened around some emotion I couldn't quite name, fear, perhaps, or maybe it was only pity for the madwoman standing before me. Either way, I kept my voice steady as stone when I asked, "And what makes you think that's me?" She smiled sadly then, reaching out to trace the pattern etched into my forearm. "Because you're here now," she said simply, "and because we're all just pawns in someone else's game anyway." With those ominous words hanging heavy between us, I knew there'd be no more turning back from this path she'd set me upon. But still, I had to try one last time. "You know what they say about pawns, Doc," I reminded her darkly. "They're the first ones to fall." "Indeed," she agreed sadly, "but sometimes it takes a fallen king to rise again."